The morning was crisp, the kind of early spring air in Willow Creek, Oregon, that bites at your knuckles while you're fixing something outside. It was March 15th, 2023, and I was out on the porch of my late grandfather's cabin, wrenching loose some weathered boards, when a car door slammed so hard it echoed through the pines. I looked up to see a woman in her late 40s, striding toward me like she was about to storm a castle. She wore a neon green vest that screamed official, but looked like it came straight off a discount rack, and she was clutching a clipboard like it was her lifeline. Something about her, call it a gut feeling, told me trouble had just rolled into my yard. My name's Thomas Carter, though folks around here just call me Tom. I'm 62, a retired welder, and all I wanted was to live quietly in the cabin my grandfather, James Carter, built back in the 1950s. After losing my wife 2 years ago, this place became my refuge, a sturdy little haven tucked in the hills outside Willow Creek. I was fixing it up to honor James, who raised me after my folks passed when I was a kid. That cabin held every memory of him teaching me to fish, chop wood, and tell right from wrong. So when this woman, who introduced herself as Margaret Walsh, barked that I had to evacuate my home immediately, I felt my blood start to boil. "Mr. Carter," she snapped, waving her clipboard like a weapon. "I'm Margaret Walsh, County Safety Inspector. This structure violates emergency ordinances. You're ordered to vacate immediately pending a structural assessment." Her voice had that rehearsed, self-important tone, but something was off. The vest was flimsy, the badge looked like it was printed at a copy shop, and her papers? Handwritten addresses on generic forms. I'm no genius, but I've dealt with enough bureaucrats to know this wasn't legit. "Ma'am," I said, setting down my hammer, "I think you've got the wrong place. This is my property, free and clear. I've had no notices about violations." Her face twisted like I'd just insulted her entire existence. "Sir, you're in violation of County Ordinance 23C. This building's condemned, and you need to leave now." That's when I got mad. This stranger was standing on my land, waving fake papers, trying to bully me out of my own home. "Margaret," I said, voice steady but firm, "I don't know what scam you're pulling, but you're leaving. Now, or I'm calling the real cops." Big mistake. Her face went crimson, and she started shaking, practically vibrating with rage. "How dare you?" she shrieked. "This cabin's a hazard to the entire community." She whipped out a demolition order with a fancy county letterhead, and for a split second, I wondered if I'd missed some legal notice. But then I remembered what James always said: when someone's pushing you hard, slow down and think. "Fine," I told her. "If this is real, you won't mind me calling the county to verify." Her confidence cracked like thin ice, eyes darting nervously. "That's not necessary," she stammered. "These orders are time-sensitive." Too late, I was already heading inside for my phone. That's when she lost it, yelling, "You're trespassing on a condemned structure," and dialed 911 right there in my yard. "Yes, this is County Inspector Margaret Walsh," she said into her phone, voice dripping with fake authority. "I've got a hostile property owner refusing to evacuate an unsafe dwelling. He's threatening violence." I stood there, jaw on the ground. This woman was lying to emergency services, painting me as some unhinged lunatic when all I'd done was ask for proof. 10 minutes later, sirens wailed up the winding road to my cabin. I braced myself, expecting a mess, but when the patrol car pulled up, I saw a familiar face, Deputy Sarah Miller, who'd been patrolling these parts for years and knew my family well. She took one look at Margaret's dollar store vest and barely hid a smirk. "Ma'am," Sarah said, "where's your county ID? That vest looks like a costume." Margaret sputtered about emergency protocols, but Sarah wasn't buying it. She turned to me. "Tom, she says you threatened her. That true?" I shook my head. "All I did was ask to verify her papers, Sarah. Something's fishy here." Sarah nodded, then told Margaret to leave my property. But instead of backing off, Margaret flashed a chilling smile and said, "You think this is over, Mr. Carter? You don't know what your family did to mine." Her voice carried a venom that made my skin crawl. This wasn't just a scam, it was personal. Sarah must have felt it too, because she pulled me aside as Margaret stalked back to her car. "Tom," she whispered, "James left something in that cabin for you. Said it'd protect the Carters if the Walsh family ever came back. You find it yet?" That night, I couldn't shake Sarah's words or Margaret's threat. The Walsh family. I never heard of them. But the way Margaret glared at me, like I was the devil himself. Told me there was history here I didn't know. The next morning, I woke to find Margaret's car parked at the end of my driveway again, this time with 3 other middle-aged folks with clipboards, cameras, and measuring tapes, poking around my land like it was a crime scene. I stormed out. "You're on private property," I shouted. Margaret, now sporting a slightly fancier vest, launched into her act again. "Mr. Carter, we're conducting a follow-up safety assessment per Ordinance 23C. One guy was measuring my grass with a ruler seriously. Who does that?" Then I noticed something that made my pulse race. They were photographing old stone markers along my property's edge, each carved with J. Carter 1948. I'd always thought they were just old fence posts, but now I saw they were boundary markers. Margaret claimed they were HOA markers, which was nonsense. There was no HOA in 1948. When I pointed this out, her composure slipped, just for a second, before she snapped. "Those carvings are fake, forged to support your family's land grab." An older guy, Harold, backed her up, claiming the Carters had been stirring up property disputes for years. But a younger woman, Emily, hesitated. "My folks bought our house from James in the 80s, she said. "He seemed decent. Why would he sell us land just to claim it back later?" That's when I knew I had to find whatever James left for me. Sarah's warning echoed in my head as I headed to the shed, Margaret trailing me, filming like she was making a documentary. "Day 2 of Carter's illegal occupation," she narrated. Inside the shed, I found a locked metal box with a tag in James's handwriting. "For Tom, emergency only." My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a folder labeled Walsh Family Dispute. It detailed how, in 1962, Margaret's great-grandfather, Henry Walsh, ran a smuggling ring, booze, drugs, you name it, and racked up debts to some nasty people. James bought Henry's farm for cash to save him from those creditors, letting the Walsh family blame him to keep Henry's crimes secret. There was even a letter from Henry, thanking James for saving my family from my mistakes. But the real bombshell was a 1948 survey map showing James owned 1,500 acres, including the entire subdivision where Margaret lived. Another note from James read, "If the Walsh family comes for revenge, show them this deed. They're living on Carter land." I was still reeling when I heard more cars pull up. Margaret had rounded up a mob of 10 neighbors, including Harold and Emily, marching toward my cabin. "There he is," Margaret yelled. "The man stealing our community's land." I stepped onto the porch, holding the map, and went for broke. "Actually, Margaret, this survey shows you're all living on my family's land." I read Henry's letter aloud, exposing his crimes and James's sacrifice. The crowd went silent. Harold looked shaken. Emily studied the map with wide eyes. Margaret screamed, "It's a forgery," but her desperation was obvious. When Sarah arrived after yet another 911 call from Margaret, I showed her the documents, including a restraining order James had filed against Margaret for years of harassment. Sarah's face hardened. "Ms. Walsh, you're violating a court order by being here." Margaret's smugness evaporated as Sarah reached for her cuffs. "This isn't over." Margaret spat as she backed away. "You think your grandfather's gone? What he did to my family is still ruining lives." Her words haunted me, especially when she mouthed, "Check the old well," as she was dragged from a later court hearing. Margaret had sued me, claiming a 60-year conspiracy to steal her family's rights. In court, her lawyer, Elizabeth Grant, spun a tale of James as a corrupt schemer, but my attorney, Mike Larson, countered with Henry's letter and proof James paid off Henry's $50,000 debt to a mob front. Margaret's composure shattered, and she was cited for contempt, screaming about a cover-up as she was removed. I couldn't ignore her well comment. 3 days later, I pried open the sealed well behind my cabin. Inside was a waterproof box with photos of Henry with criminals, a confession letter detailing his smuggling empire, and James's notes explaining he hid the truth to protect Henry's family from retaliation. But the kicker? James had preserved a trust fund Henry left $25,000 that James grew to $180,000 for the Walsh family. I met Margaret at her lawyer's office and showed her everything. Her anger melted into stunned laughter as she realized James had been her family's protector, not their enemy. "I spent my life hating him," she whispered, tears streaming. To make amends, she suggested using the trust fund to build a community center on her family's old farm. We did just that, creating a space with a library and a museum telling the true story of Willow Creek's families. Margaret, once a terror, became a beloved leader, and I finally understood James's legacy, protecting others, even when they didn't know it. So what do you think? Was Margaret a villain or just a victim of her family's lies? Should I have kept the trust fund secret to avoid more drama? Drop your thoughts below. Hit that like button if this story got your blood pumping. And subscribe for more tales where truth turns enemies into allies. What's the wildest family secret you've uncovered?